All right, how you guys doing? We're gonna talk today about how some successful founders have failed in the past and what they failed on that almost killed their company, but they somehow were able to maneuver and get past it, but want to share those failures with you here now, so you guys don't make the same mistakes. Well, so I'm just gonna go through and just quickly introduce everyone. So we'll start on the end there. Michael Constantiner is a co-founder of Vimeo, which was acquired by, co-founder of Cameo. Sorry, that was acquired by Vimeo in March. That's great. He's also a partner in a Brooklyn-based coffee roaster, Parlor Coffee,
which they serve here, but
which they serve.
Ironically.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Maybe not ironic. And previously was the co-founder of a group messaging app, Fast Society. And I'm going to skip that last line on the bio. That was cute. Next is Peter Hananel. After starting his career in finance, Peter has been an entrepreneur and a noted consumer expert since 2008, with his work being chronicled in a range of publications, including Vogue, Women's Wear Daily, New York Times, GQ, Vanity Fair, TechCrunch, and others. Cool. And then after Peter, we have Alex Tryon. She is a co-founder of Artsicle, a site to discover the world's artists. They currently promote work by over 4,000 visual artists from 70 different countries. And then right next to me is Vipin Goyal. Vipin's a co-founder and CEO of SideTour, which was acquired by Groupon in September of 2013. Since joining Groupon, in addition to managing the SideTour business, Vipin is also heads a business development department for Groupon Live. Great. So again, we're just going to be talking about things that you guys have failed on in the past, but yet you were able to maneuver out of and now are still successful. And we're going to just try and educate everyone here to try and not make those same mistakes. I'm sure I've made some of them too in the past, so I might chime in every once in a while. One of the topics that I wanted to start off on was the idea of how to figure out your audience and who to build for. And when you were initially building, did you just nail it on the head the first time? How did you discover that? Did you fail in the process? How did you get yourself to be successful and actually figure out that audience to actually grow your company? So Michael, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess for us, like for instance, like we with Cameo. So Cameo is a mobile application that allows you to easily create very elegant, beautiful videos that are easily shareable. And we built it with the idea of that pretty much that anybody could use it, and kind of like in the process, the importance of kind of defining your audience and building a product is it helps you kind of like put limitations on what features and what kind of like where to say no and what kind of like sorry, I'm kind of rambling here on this. Just basically like you need to define who you're building for so you can make very clear decisions when it comes to that point of like, do we spend a few extra months trying to build out this feature set or not? And if you don't have a very clear definition of who that is, you can end up just like running on and on and on and building like a very bloated product. So it's very important to have an idea, and it might not be right, and through the process you might change that and learn it, but it's at least you want to have a very clear vision of who your target audience is, build the product based off who they are, and then iterate as you kind of like continue to build. So
did you build it for someone at first?
Yeah, we did. And one of the, I think we were pretty, we knew who we were building for. We were building for the amateur kind of like filmmaker, somebody who's never like edited film together, right? We wanted to make something super simple. Part of the process, aside from that, we also had the idea that filmmakers would also get a lot of value out of Cameo, but during our beta and like development process, we learned very clearly that they weren't really latching onto Cameo that well because there was the limitations that were too much for them. And so that became, for us, it's a great learning experience, because when we launched the product and when you market the product, we knew not to focus any energy on them, right? Or if we do, it's very, very special cases, but really focus on our target audience of people who aren't filmmakers or don't have a lot of experience going into it.
Cool. Vipin, how did you first collect all your users and actually know who to target? And did you fail when you were first trying to do that?
Yeah, so just for those of you who don't know, Side Tour, the company that we started, is a marketplace for experiences. So you have people who are experts at something, hosting events that could be like chefs doing home cooked meals or artists walking you through the Met. And so, in the beginning, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out. The idea was inspired by a travel experience. And we were trying to figure out, are we really targeting travelers or are we targeting locals? And that was like the big focus. We went through Techstars. We asked every mentor that we met, what was their thoughts on this. And we ended up choosing locals. And that was way too broad, basically. Like the idea that was our customer was still, we kept trying to narrow it further and further. And I would say the big mistake, one of the big failures in the beginning was we'd never narrowed enough. Because especially for consumer, you're at a place where we needed to be a site that, if you had what was your specific need that would make you think, all right, I go to Side Tour every time I want to have a home cooked meal or I want to see a museum. We were so broad that you were going to Side Tour whenever you were looking for something interesting to do and you were kind of bored, and that was just, it was way too broad. And I think I remember talking to the folks who were early at eBay, very, very early on, and they tell stories about how eBay started with Barbie dolls and collectibles, and still the marketplace was so narrow, uncomfortably narrow. And we actually always felt uncomfortable, frankly, narrowing further than where we were, but I think it would have served us a lot better had we been much narrower in who our customer is.
Cool.
I think that's interesting because we had the opposite experience with Artsicle. So we started off as a site to rent original artwork, which is about as niche as it can get because none of you have ever heard of it. And we kind of tried to create a market. And we figured out that when you try to do that, you're spending all of your time. Your consumer is definitely not searching for this because they don't know that it exists. What they're searching for is find artwork. And somewhere along the way, we realized that, oh wait, that's what we should be doing. We should be a place that's bringing all the world's artists together to discover them in one place. And then, sure, maybe you can buy it, maybe you can rent it, maybe you can get a commission, but that actually was the detail for us. But we had to fail pretty hard on the first part to figure that out by spending 2.5 years trying to convince people that they actually wanted to search for renting art, which they didn't.
So, to chime in here, for Beautified, which we launched about a year ago, an app that lets women and men book last-minute beauty appointments, sort of playing into the on-demand economy that's obviously quite a growing, interesting space. We thought that sort of the best way to kind of get our footing and understanding of we knew that this was the angle that we wanted to take, but what services do you offer, and sort of trying to make sure that we were very focused, given that we're building a marketplace ultimately that's very time consuming to build. We wanted to just make sure that we were had some good insights about what the consumers that we were trying to reach, primarily women, were sort of seeking and would be willing to book at the last minute. And so we ran a bunch of surveys actually that kind of helped guide us quite a bit. But what's funny is sort of the key mistake or lesson from my perspective of that exercise was that the data doesn't always show you everything. So for New York, it's a very unique city where there's manicure parlors, for example, on every corner. And the response from our earliest sort of users and the folks that we surveyed was that they would book manicures like crazy at the last minute. But the reality was that they actually just walk into the manicure salon and they kind of book it they don't even book it. They just sort of hang out. I didn't quite understand that as sort of not our target user. I'm fortunate to have two female business partners that sort of look after a lot more of kind of the insights about the behaviors that we're trying to drive for. But it was just a really interesting kind of exercise to see that you have to work off of a little bit of gut and also sort of understand that the data is not always going to be kind of the full story.
Cool. The next topic, and it kind of kind of hits home for me too is hiring and firing. I feel like I've messed that up so much, and in my business. I mean, I still think I haven't figured it out yet. I'm still learning. I know every month I learn a new tactic. But I mean, just to like share a little quick story with you. Even last month, I run a development shop, so developers are like our main core talent at the company, and so of course we're now a little bit more popular, and we've built some popular products. So there's a ton of people hitting us up. So one of the things I have to do is scale my development team, and so. I met a developer. He was a little bit awkward, and he had a little bit of a twitch, but his code looked good. And I was like, it's fine. I'll make like a cultural sacrifice because and everyone says hire for culture, and I made kind of a cultural sacrifice, and I hired the guy even though he was a little weird and he was sweating and he kind of smelled a little bit. But I was like, no, like he built this other app that's kind of cool, and we'll put him there. And so his first day, I talked to him at the end of the day. He's the same awkward guy and still like kind of this little twitch, and he's like, I had a great day, cool. Next day I went to a conference. I got a message that he started freaking out that there was no whiteboard on his desk, and he walked out and he's like, I can't work at this company, and ran out the door. And I was just like, and I was thinking in my head, I'm like, I knew there was something up with this guy, and then, I was like, whatever, like his code looked really good, and it's like, it's all about good quality code, and so I've made a bunch of mistakes. I'm still making them now. Are there any like kind of big lessons that you've learned, and just speak up, whoever like kind of is like, I'm really passionate about this one story, like this one's like my funniest hire. That was like amazing to me that, everyone, because I was like, and also sent like a shockwave to the company. It's like, why did this guy come in and then like leave? And it was worse for me to try and just make a cultural sacrifice. And now I'm being a lot more picky about it. I just interviewed like a slightly awkward developer yesterday, and I was like, no, thank you. Like, just like moved on. So what lessons do you guys have?
So I have one. Our first hire was a complete failure, and it was completely my fault. So we were building this rental business, and basically I was our CEO, but I was spending all of my time packing boxes and delivering them by hand, because we hadn't figured out like our actual operations system yet. So we wanted to hire an operations person. And we talked one of our best friends into quitting his cushy consulting job, moving to New York, and coming to work for us. He's one of the smartest people I knew. And that's what you've always been told, right? Like, hire the smartest people you know, figure out the rest later. I thought I was like 100% on track. And he was there for about a month, and he had operationalized everything. He had done his job, all of it. There was nothing left for me to have him to do. And everything left to be done in the company was marketing, was design work, was programming, and those weren't skills that he had, and those weren't skills that he was that interested in developing in the time that we needed. And we had to let him go. And it was because we couldn't, you can't hold dead weight. We were a company of 3, and he was the only one on payroll. So, we had to have this terrible, terrible experience of telling one of our best friends that he had just left a job, moved to New York to come work with us, and it wasn't working. And the reality was he knew that too. He'd seen it, and he also was incredibly grateful because apparently that job that he loved, he actually had hated, and he never knew it because he had never worked for a small company. But I think the lesson that I learned that I would pass on is be able to define the job really, really clearly. And be able to, and when I say define the job, I don't mean say it's the head of operations. I mean the head of operations does these 10 things which take X amount of time every week or every month. Like, if you can't go through that process of writing that down, you're probably not ready to make that hire. And unless the person happens to be one of those rare, amazingly flexible people who can kind of pick up other things, it's going to be an uncomfortable, if not just complete failure of a hire.
I'll riff on that for a second, actually, because I think that, in my experience at least, the best hires that we've made to date, and we're still also quite a small team, but been fortunate to sort of be building and growing, is that for us at least, it's been finding people that that can have a lot of autonomy has been one of, I think, the things that we've really looked for, because as a small team, there's just not a lot of time in the day to sort of micromanage other people's work or even staff them up on things necessarily. So you need people that really kind of just inherently know what's going to be best for the company. And obviously there's plenty of sort of touch bases and ongoing communication, but I think to sort of also touch into what Rameet was saying, I think cultural fit is a critical thing that you just have to be really mindful of. So sometimes the resume looks amazing and you're just like, well, this person would be unbelievable on the deck, or, all the wrong reasons. But what we learned also so far sort of over the short time span of really the last year of scaling our team has been, you just sort of know right off the bat if someone's going to be kind of a great cultural fit. And, oftentimes 1 + 1 equals far more than that when you bring the right people together in the right room. And so, that's just one of the insights and lessons, I think, coming out of our first year.
Cool. Michael, Vipin, and you guys want to add anything, or should we?
I just have one thing. So we ended up 6 months into starting the company. We had 4 co-founders, and we let go of one. And so, that was difficult because he was also the best man at another co-founder's wedding. So there was always personal relationship. But the thing that was harder about this was that we had just raised capital from 2 VCs, and that closed about 10 days prior. And we were having our first board meeting a week later. And we'd come to the conclusion in between those 2 events that this was not working. And so part of the fear that we had was there's a big credibility issue. We just raised money from 2 VCs. First time founders, first time raising money. And the guy that wasn't working out was our lead engineer and our only engineer. So we were building a tech company. We were about to let go of our technical co-founder. And we were going to go to our board and tell them. And so that was very frightening.
It was perfect timing though, because I hear you need a technical co-founder to help with the raising process. So.
Well, we needed a new one then.
Right.
So, but the lesson for me, so we went 2.5 months without an engineer building a tech company. 3 co-founders, 2 business co-founders, a product guy, but no engineering. And yet we ended up hiring someone from Pivotal Labs who was phenomenal 2.5 months later. And we were able to talk the board through why we were doing this. They were fully supportive. I mean, they were backing us as a group. They were backing me as a CEO. So that was, so the fear that I had, the thing is, and even though, so the lesson for me was, even when, sometimes you feel like, well, let me find the backup first. Before I let go of this person, I need to have an engineer, so let me figure that out. And we found it was much better because there were certain frictions that weren't working. We had to sort of jump, and hopefully we would be able to kind of find another person that would be able to play almost a founding role in the company. Even though we learned that lesson, I still made that same mistake 6-12 months later when we were looking at a key salesperson on our team, and we're I want to find someone else. It's not working, but I'm not willing to let go. And I feel like that's a lesson that comes up over and over again. And as soon as you know that it's not right, even when you don't have someone to backfill that, I would recommend, it's not necessarily universal, but I would recommend firing and then forcing yourself to figure out the solution.
Yeah, it really lights a fire on you. We've had several situations where, we've been in the same boat where we know it's not going to work, but we don't want to rock the boat too much.
Yes.
So we're just going to let it kind of sail, even though it might have a hole in it, until we find the right person. And we've seen in cases where, say, we have made the right decision to let them go, or they've understood that it's not working out and they left, we were able to just find that person and fill that role. So as much as sometimes you just want the boat to sail smoothly, just rock the boat a little bit. It's okay. It'll light a fire on you, and you'll just have to stabilize it. You'll be forced to stabilize it.
To add to the hiring thing is specifically with developer talent, we made a mistake a few times of hiring somebody too junior for that role. I think when you're a startup in a technology space, it's always this really weird balance of how much money do you really have to spend on development, but that's really everything. That's your product is. And so we had a tough time where, we had a very junior developer way in over his head, which actually caused the product to, be the development process to slow down extremely. The product wasn't as good as it should have been. It really set us back. And so I would just say, when it comes to development experience, even though I love the young guys with all their passion, experience really goes a long way when it comes to building out your product.
Cool. The next thing I wanted to talk about was launch. I actually have an interesting kind of like theory on launch, or maybe it's not a theory, but I follow the school of thought of launching soon and launching quickly, and not a big PR push around your launch. I tend to devalue the PR angle of things. I've heard some companies kind of refute that, and some founders refute that, where they attribute a lot of their success to like a big kind of launch, whereas I prefer for something to kind of go out again, like at my previous talk, within a week, hopefully within a month, and then just keep on iterating and keep on tweaking, figure out how you're going to acquire users, then just keep on growing that. So I'm curious if, I'm sure you guys have some launch stories. Michael, you seem to be nodding pretty heavily there.
Yes.
Tell me.
No, look, I think there's a lot of like really nice things that come from press. Like specifically as the founder, there's like, your name is like in TechCrunch, and like you get to put it on Facebook, and it's like, look, all my friends, like I'm a real deal. But at the end of the day, like your launch press is just like, it gives you that kind of validation, credibility, but it doesn't get you users. It doesn't like, nobody that's reading TechCrunch is probably in that target audience that we were originally talking about, most likely, right? So, I know my partner is back here and we differ on this a lot, but like I think that spending the X amount of thousands of dollars that you would pay for a PR company for your launch press, I would rather spend that on marketing towards your target audience and build organic growth. And then you're going to have all the press in the, if you have a successful product, then you'll hire a PR company to manage all the inbound press, right? So that's what I think about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, to kind of expand on that and kind of give it the beautified perspective. I think that it's just a very slippery slope to sort of line everything up around the media. Obviously things happen, there's delays, and it can be very challenging if and stressful for sure if you have sort of everything kind of pinned to a certain date that things are going to run, especially if you're working with print media. So we were fortunate to have a feature in Vogue magazine that we had going live in February of 2013 last year, and basically the product wound up taking a little bit more time to build, and we wound up taking the product live in May. And of course in that interim time we were kind of like just going nuts. We really wanted the world to see what we were building, it's just one of those, I think, slippery slopes really is kind of the best way to describe it. It's just you really want to kind of push out into the world, and I do think actually a big splashy launch can be actually very effective in terms of getting a lot of momentum right out of the gate, but you just have to really kind of be thoughtful about the strategy around that launch. Because
is there anything that you failed on during your launch?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Well,
the app wasn't out.
First of all, the app wasn't out when this media hit, kind of, and so that was, we sort of hacked around that and kind of had people signing up for mailing lists and kind of delayed like invitation only beta, and so kind of fake it till you make it a little bit there, but it was cool. I mean, I think that it was just, there were a lot of challenges with that, and then also it's just we had actually a glitch the first day when the product did finally launch, and we had fortunately kind of had some press lined up that day, and then the app was crashing, and so we had to have this emergency sort of like submission to Apple to kind of get the new product out there. And so definitely some big mistakes made, and I think to me the key learning there has been that it's very dangerous to tie everything to sort of the press that you're expecting to sort of build around the launch. And,
cool.
And I think that it's best to probably look longer view and say that press will continue to come over time. If it's a good product, yeah.
So I have a slightly different perspective on what goes wrong from launch, other than the fact that, so similarly, we had done an embargo, we had done 4 stories with different people that were all going to launch the next morning, and so we were coding until 4 a.m. and the first story hit at 4:30 or 5 a.m., so I didn't sleep. for 48 hours, and the site kind of worked. Maybe one person ordered something. I think that person was in the room with us. We didn't have Google Analytics on it, so we had no idea whether or not anything was actually working. It was there, but not working for some, those kind of things. But something really significant happened that we lived with for a really long time, and we're still living now, which is that people loved it in the press. Everybody loved the idea of Artsicle as Netflix for art, this art rental business. Mind you, over here, right, one order from a guy sitting next to me. Over here, the press is snowballing. Those 4 articles we lined up was 20 by the end of the week in international magazines that we didn't serve. And so we were like, wow, there is just so much demand for this product. Except over here, we had 2 orders now, right? So what we got was a huge false positive. The press loved our product. They loved the story. It's a cool story. It wasn't real consumer interest. And we didn't really figure that out for more than 2 years. Because it's really loud when people keep writing about you and telling you how awesome your product is. It's way cooler to believe them than to believe your revenue numbers. So we kept thinking like, hey, if we fix checkout, make it more streamlined, if we make the, this process, if we bring on more art. And so that was just a really, really hard, long failure that took more than 2 years to figure out. And I think if we'd done what Rameet had said and actually kind of betaed the site with, the maybe hundreds of people that we could have brought to it from cheap ads and things like that, we would have looked at those numbers and been like, shit, no one's buying anything, and maybe rethought it a little bit before we did our big one splash, because you only get one chance at that. We'll be Netflix for art no matter how many times we pivot the site. I will always be having some percent, at this point it's maybe only 2 or 3% of the people hitting the site asking me where the Netflix stuff is, but they always will. So that's something you live with, your launch.
Yeah. Anything to add?
I'll pass my time to the next.
Yeah, awesome. So the next one's interesting. It's fundraising and financing. And so we have several people on the panel that have sold their company and have a little bit of insight in terms of when they were raising funds, they kind of felt one thing, and then when they actually sold, maybe they were like, oh, if I could go back, I would do things differently. So if anyone wants to chime in, do you feel your kind of fundraising happened in line with how you would want it to, like post sale? Was there anything there you want to chime in on?
I'm thinking about.
Okay,
I'm thinking about a lesson.
I know Michael has an interesting.
I wouldn't
one.
say it like related directly to this sale, but in terms of just like, there's, I guess we were talking about this the other day, but like, the strategy, the structure of your fundraising can like really affect like kind of your like you emotionally as a founder when things aren't going that well, right? So like specifically convertible debt. Back, this was 4 years ago, like we were talking about this, convertible debt was like the hottest brand new thing in fundraising. And so everybody was doing things on convertible debt. But convertible debt, if you're fundraising, if you kill it right out the gate and like everything goes well, like convertible debt, there's no problem like with convertible debt. The problem is if things don't go well, which happens to like 99% of companies, convertible debt becomes like the biggest pain in the ass ever, right? It's like there's not like clear ownership structures. You have this thing called a maturity date where the money that the company owes the people that lended it to, like, is supposed to be paid back plus interest. And to get that extended, you have to go tell your investors, hey, things aren't going that well. We haven't hit that like next equity financing to convert this into equity. Can we extend this? It's just something that you just don't want to deal with that as a founder. It's like the last thing you want to do.
And how many times did you have to do that?
We had to do it like 3 or 4 times. You just knew in the back of your mind, like especially like for us, like we ended up into like from one company to the other, kept the same structure, the same investors. So things kept extending longer and longer as we built out this like very complex product.
Wait, so I have a question there. So you went from one company to another company.
Same structure,
and
same entity. Yeah.
Same investors. And if you had to go back, would you do it the same way?
Yeah, because like those guys were our team, right? Like, loyalty is like something that we believe in, like fundamentally, and like that's what this is. The original decision to not shut down the first company and like start the new one was because those guys had believed in us and gave us a shot. And so, and look, like things weren't always easy, but like if you have a good investor on your team, like they're with you and they're like, look, that's their $100,000 or their $200,000.
Right.
Like they don't want that to go away, right? So it's always like a quick email, like, hey, so and so, like we're heading out to LA. Can you make some intros? Like we're like hitting the ground, and then he's like, yeah, here, bam, 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 like go kill it because you're killing it on his behalf.
Right.
So
And while we're on the topic of investors,
Yeah.
any advice for like maybe to, I guess maybe you can't talk about it, but if you can talk about it, any advice for like maybe investors to shy away from, or
they're all amazing. No, it's really hard.
maybe not yours, but stories that you've heard?
I just think that I think the most important, look, it's very hard to tell investors, it's, a lot of times you meet, especially your seed round, you meet an investor, and they'll write you a check, literally as you leave their office. So you've known that person for 30 minutes to 2 hours, right? So it's really how you, what are they going to be like when things get hard? It's very difficult because the energy's so high, and you're like, oh yeah, this is going to be $1 billion company. Here's $100,000, and next week I'm going to send you another $100,000.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to forecast. Some people I've gotten calls to reference check investors, which I think is weird because everybody probably has a different relationship with their investors. But I think the most important thing is, and we might have not done this that well, is just being very open and keep a very open communicative line of communication with your investors, because I think it's very difficult. It's way easier said than done, because when things aren't going well, it's very hard to reach out to them and say hey, things are still struggling, the product's getting pushed back another 6 months. They hate hearing that stuff, but at the same time, I think if you go in with the mentality of these guys are on your team, they're here to help you, and if you approach them with that mentality, there's no way they're not going to try to help you, right? So, and I think if you are open and honest from the beginning with them, it's a lot better than all of a sudden popping up out of nowhere. Hey, well, dude, I haven't heard from you in 6 months, and now you want me to sign this maturity extension, okay, well, we need to talk about it. It's
Yeah.
But it's due tomorrow,
Yeah, got it. Nice.
I think it's be open and very communicative with them. They're on your team.
Cool. So we're going to talk 5 more minutes on this, and we're going to open it up for Q&A. And so I just want to let you guys know, 5 more minutes, if you can start thinking of some questions, we're going to do a little Q&A right after this. Anyone else on funding, fundraising, investors?
So less out of failure. I actually think that the way our financing worked out and the entire process was very positive for us. But a bunch of lessons that came out. One is there are a lot of people who advise founders that if you can help it, don't constitute a board, take convertible debt, or just don't put anyone on your board so you don't have to deal with this. I actually found we ended up, our seed round was $1.5 million, and we took it from 2 VCs, so both of them sat on our board. We had a 2-2-1 structure. We never filled the independent seat, so it was basically 2 and 2. And I found it to be extremely, it was a forcing mechanism to pull back. We had board meetings every other month, and the reality is you're in the weeds. You're trying to figure out all these parts of your business, and the people say the board meetings are a waste of time because you spend 3 days working on a deck. I would say if you can kind of minimize that, obviously that's helpful, but it was a forcing mechanism for us. It wasn't necessarily the conversation we were having with them, but it forced our team to pull up and be like, how is this going? What are we doing against the metrics? Where do we need to get to in 6 months? And I think if we didn't, it would be easy for 6 months to go by and be just in the weeds. So that's one thing. The second thing is when it came time when we were considering sale, our board was incredibly valuable in thinking about how we had conversations with Groupon. We started in a BD relationship. We launched a handful of our experiences on their site. They did really well. And our board essentially not forced, but they highly recommended. We had 12 months of capital left. They were like, we should start quickly having conversations with a bunch of other people and they were absolutely right. With Groupon, the first test was done. They're like, okay, let's expand this test and let's do a bigger one. And as soon as we had another bidder in the mix, and this is kind of negotiation 101, but it really played out this way. One more bidder in the mix, Groupon went to term sheet in 7 days, and our the valuation was kind of 2, 3x what they started at. So those dynamics are really important. And our investors were instrumental in, because we thought, well, we have a lot of time right now. We have 12 months of runway. Like, let's kind of keep building the business and then have this conversation with them. But it doesn't work when your back is against the wall. So
I'm gonna add one more thing about fundraising. I think is like really important. I think understanding where you are as a company and how much you should raise is essential, because it's very like you can go into a fundraising meeting and try to ask for too much money, or that you're raising a Series A even though you haven't launched your product. The investor is going to immediately write you off. Like, understand who the investor is you're approaching, where you are, what stage of your company. Like, don't go to a VC if you haven't launched your product yet, right? Like, a VC wants to see like at least 3 to 6 months of metrics, whereas a seed investor is going to be like, okay, and like, here's a check for $50K. I think just that's something that's really important. And I see like a lot of people like who like we've talked to come to us and be like, yeah, we're gonna go raise a Series A, and I'm like, dude, you can't raise a Series, like, you're so far away from raising a Series A. Like, keep your mentality wise, like, you're a seed round, you're still building, exploring.
Cool. Anything to add?
I would just add that the process is a very challenging one for sure. Like, for I think anyone that's been through it will say that it's one of the hardest things you have to do as an entrepreneur. But I think that what's important is that there is a little bit of an asymmetry of information within the process, because obviously on one side of the table is the venture community or the professional investing community that understands deal dynamics and kind of does this every single day. And especially for a seed financing, it's you're very new to it probably. So lean into the people that you trust and try to find people that have been through it, preferably several times, so they can kind of give you some good insights and perspective. Whereas in other areas of the business, I think you kind of do need to trust your gut, more frequently. This is an area where I think that it really it is very helpful to kind of lean into people that can be helpful to you.
Cool. Yeah. One of the things I heard was also that if you're going to go up to an investor, go up. Be one of the investors' regular size checks, and don't be one of the investors' like smallest checks, because then they're just more vested in you and in your future, and you'll have more of a relationship that Michael was referring to in terms of that closer relationship. Cool. So we have another 5 minutes for Q&A. So I told you guys to think of questions. I gave you notice.
I have two that are related. One is, have you ever had, maybe this applies to you, but have you ever had a deadbeat partner that was like dead weight, and then you had to say like, hey, it's kind of time, this isn't really working out.
Right.
How did you deal with it?
Yeah.
And number two was like what you were talking about earlier about sort of this sweat equity, bringing in a partner.
Vesting schedule.
What is it?
A vesting schedule.
Vesting schedule.
Yeah.
So those two things.
Cool.
Like how do you go about the vesting
Yeah.
schedule?
Vipin, did you have a vesting schedule with your partner that?
yes, we did.
Lucky you.
Well, I mean, we absolutely believe. I mean, I remember reading Chris Dixon's post about like the fact is like you may end up going separate ways. So we put in a vesting schedule for the 4 of us, especially because there were 4 of us.
Right.
Even before we raised any financing.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, that was really important. And I believe I would do that again and again, even though, even if I have more leverage the next time, I just think it makes sense to do that.
There should be a vesting schedule for everybody. That,
Yeah.
There should.
you hire, like, anybody who works for you, like, that gets any kind of equity. Like,
Also advisors.
Oh, yeah.
Advisor shares can vest.
Yeah,
We'll
very,
do that.
very long period. Those guys need like a 10-year vesting schedule.
So what's your advice if you're stuck?
If you're what?
If you're stuck.
You didn't do a vesting schedule, and you got a deadbeat partner.
You have to renegotiate that.
Yeah,
Like,
you've got to get unstuck. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's like firing.
I mean,
right? You've got to do it as fast as you possibly can.
No, but you have some leverage, right? It's
always
if he doesn't renegotiate with you, you can also just say, cool, I'm going to stop. Be like, hey, listen, you deserve a piece of what you've contributed to date. It's clearly not what you're going to retain or what we've assigned to you, assuming you were going to stay the long haul. So, like, renegotiating isn't kind of out. And then if you do renegotiate and you're like, hey, listen, this is what's fair, then this is what's fair. Otherwise, like, hey, it's not going to be worth anything because I'm not going to put my time and effort in if it's only for half the company.
So you would still offer them something if there was.
If you feel that there's value or that they've added value.
Yeah.
That happened to a friend of mine, exactly. And
Yeah.
the guy was like, he offered him, basically they said like, well, look, most people go on a 4-year vesting schedule. You would be somewhere in this range.
Right.
Let's call it even there. And the guy was being very unreasonable. And so he just like, all right, it's fine. I shut down the company and then restarted.
But that's a good idea to actually, even though you didn't have a vesting schedule, actually talk about that. That's-
I mean, just like pretend like we,
Yeah.
we started the company on September 1st. Like
Yeah.
it's been 2 years and 4 months. Like,
That's good.
here you go.
A 4-year vesting schedule is very, very normal. So if you want
Yeah.
like a reference point, I'm
That's great.
not sure I've seen many exceptions
Right.
to that.
Just be careful when you close down
Yeah.
and restart your company
Yeah.
without the guy. He will have an opportunity to sue you.
Yeah.
So
Do that with
no,
like
no,
very,
no.
like with legal advice.
Yeah. Basically, if you involve a lawyer, if you feel the need to, or for a friend, just slightly change the idea. Just like something small. And if it's a slightly different idea, then there's nothing there. Hopefully he's not
I
here.
would get legal advice before
On an
you
idiot.
Yeah. Not lawyer.
slightly change the
at all.
idea.
Oh, great. Yeah. Grain of salt. Don't take advice from.
Yeah.
I've never done it before.
Lawyers.
Yeah. Cool. We have time for another. Yeah, go ahead.
Sort of on funding, but not really. Did any of you think about hustling, scamming, cheating, not raising money, but actually, getting money in through the door?
Bootstrap.
Yeah, bootstrapping, not raising and
Yeah.
trying to see it out for as long as you possibly could, even attempting to go to the end.
If you
Right.
can, you should. Like, getting investors are like they're amazing and they help you, but like, if you can own 100% of your company, like, that's amazing, right? Like, I don't know if you heard Rameet's talk earlier. He was saying like some founder has been, like busting his ass for 5 years and now owns 10% of the company. It's like, that's like sucks, to be honest,
Yeah. So I have a couple comments to that. So I've built my company without raising funds, but everyone here has basically a scalable, like an almost infinitely scalable product where I have a service company. So it's very different for a service company, like that type of business model. Like, you shouldn't be raising funds. You should be offering a service that adds value and then making a margin off of that, right? Although to counter what Michael said, yeah, you could own 100%, but in a lot of cases, it's either 100% of a smaller pie than, that what might be, 70% or 20% or of a much larger pie, right? There's some opportunities that are out there where it is timed, right? Because the market's constantly moving and we are in a frothy market right now. And so if you want to build to sell and, the investors also can help you with that sales process, like Vipin was saying. So a lot of times, like, you will have control, you won't have to report to anyone, but a lot of times that capital will get you where you need to go and actually succeed.
Yeah.
So while it's a lot more, valiant to say, oh, I built my company myself, often that company's smaller, and sometimes you'll take 3 years to do something and the market might be over, whereas you could have capitalized in 1 year if you had the cash.
I guess even taking further, starting up and doing all your activities, all your PR marketing to find customers or to find a funding partner.
So we bootstrapped for a little over a year. So we built a real business before we felt like we could go talk to investors. I wanted to be able to tell an investor exactly what I was doing with their money, and for us it was the first time we hit a wall where it was like, we actually can't grow at the speed we should be growing because I don't have, in my case it was like 15K that I needed to order more boxes. And I was just tapped out. And we were running too tight on what we were bringing in the door to ever save up 15K to order more boxes, and that was a stupid reason to not be growing the business.
Yeah.
And so we started talking to investors, and we ended up raising $390,000. That's all we ever raised 4 years ago. So for us, that was kind of our version of bootstrapping, right? It was completely getting it to market, validating the idea. I'm not 100% sure if I would do it exactly like that again, but it's very possible to get to the point where you're like, this is a real business and I have a choice. And we 100% had a choice. We did not have to raise money. We chose that we wanted a bigger pie. We wanted to grow it faster, and so we went and raised.
Right.
And we bootstrapped the business as well, and I think that it was a wonderful sort of experience and allowed us to sort of operate a lot more scrappily and kind of creatively, and there's a lot of value in kind of having to cut your teeth sort of through without this idea of like you spending entirely someone else's money, and obviously it makes you have to wear more hats and learn more, fail more quickly as well.
Potentially not test as much or not be able to throw money.
Yep.
Yeah,
you have no money to throw at anything when you bootstrap, right? Like we did no paid marketing. That was not going to be a thing we could afford.
and no money to throw at anything after you raise money either. But yeah, I mean, for us it was a great experience, but definitely it does come with some constraints in terms of the capital constraints that Alex was really kind of touching into. And so once you start to feel that, you do really want to be able to have a team around you, and the best I think part about raising money is actually to hopefully have the opportunity to kind of work with some amazing people that can help you in ways you couldn't possibly fathom in terms of their skills and expertise in areas that you just have no idea about. And so also I would say, finding the right syndicate and hopefully being fortunate enough to kind of have the opportunity to kind of curate a very strategic one, especially early on, is something that's been
Cool.
I think don't be get the money that you need to achieve your goals, right? Don't just be lean to keep ownership. If it's, we needed to hire X amount of engineers that all cost $150,000 a year, plus a very beautiful Soho shared office space that costs a lot of money, right? You need that money. So if you can afford it to do it yourself, amazing. If you can't, you got to go to investors or sell something, right?
Right,
You
do
need to
something.
do
Cool.
it. Yeah.
All right, guys. So we're out of time. Thank you so much for participating, and thank you all for attending.